welcome to an awesome topic that we have for you today. I'm here with Dr. Sonia and Dr. Caitlin, and we are going to talk about contraception. Which contraception is the best and which is the worst? And we're coming at it from a health slant. So I think that we have all three of us have had numerous conversations about how do you advise women? I'll tell you the thought process that I went through with my daughter and what contraception was going to be the most effective and not destroy her health. And how do we make some smart decisions around this? And I'm going to start off by saying there is no easy answer discussion. So you are literally hearing a discussion amongst three women that deal with patients that have had a lot of destruction happen to their body from contraception, that are, women that have used contraception and how we made our choices. And then I'm happy to poke in on how I helped understand the best decision for my daughter and the thought process I went through that. So get ready, because this is a very complicated subject, and we're hoping to shed some light and help you have the tools to be able to make the best decision for you and for your family. So with that, okay, who wants to start? Anybody want to start by just talking about here, let me start with the end in mind. I know you guys are the same way. When I sit down with a patient, especially somebody who's had so many gut issues, one of my first questions is, how long have you been on the birth control pill? And what I see is that when you start to get into your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and times when your health is breaking down, especially when you look at it from a gut perspective, that is where the adverse reactions of these contraceptive medications show up. And as somebody who is always working with like Candida and things like that, the pill is the one thing that I am just absolutely not a fan of. So I'm just gonna start with that because I think it's really hard to come back from 20 years of the pill. I think it's very difficult. You really jeopardize your long-term health. So
yeah, it's not only
let's start with that.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the physical health too. It's the mental, emotional health, and it's weight gain. There's so many different aspects of the pill that affect women. So the first thing I always do is ask, what's your intention? There's different various reasons why women are thinking about contraception or the pill and wanting to know the information about different kinds. So maybe we can kind of even lay out the different kinds of contraceptions there are out there, maybe the pros and cons and how they even work. Because I don't think a lot of women even know what it's doing in the body or what it's made of, what's in it, and what are the actual effects. So maybe just starting off with the pill, because that's probably one of the most popular ones. And a lot of young women in their teens sometimes are put on the pill for not just birth control. Sometimes it's for their skin, or if they're getting heavy bleeds, or if they're getting irregular bleeds. So instead of teaching these young women tools on different things that they can do to help their hormones, the only answer they seem to get is, well, here's the pill, it's going to regulate your cycle. And that's the only thing that we can do. So I think maybe just starting there and like teaching that these are some aspects of the pill that you want to know about, so you can choose the right one or the right type of contraception, or have the right conversations and questions to go into your doctor with. I think maybe starting there would be good. How about Dr. Caitlin, maybe start with talking about the pill a little bit.
Yeah, so there's two different types of pills. There's the one that has estrogen and progesterone, and then there's the mini pill, which just has progesterone. And regardless, whenever you take something that is an external hormone, you're really throwing off your internal body's ability to make its own hormones. So I think one of the biggest problems is, at 16, 14, whatever it is, when these girls get put on the pill, nobody ever talks to them about how long should you be on the pill, or what can we do to give our bodies a break from just constantly taking an external source. Because what can happen is your body isn't going to make the hormones if you're giving it to it. It's just like anything. So those are the two different types. And there's a 28-day and a 21-day. There's some people just continuously take the pill day after day so they don't ever get a cycle. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, not getting a cycle is scary. Like the human body was meant to shed once a month. So yeah. I think even the Mirena slows your cycle down, the IUD. But I think that is concerning. There's something cleansing about having that cycle. So if you're not shedding, what's going on? My other thought with the pill early on that I'm concerned about is that the pituitary and the ovaries, they're creating a communication connection. And when you first get your period and your brain is learning how to regulate the whole hormonal system, when you throw something synthetic in there, it messes with the body's own internal intelligence. Mm-hmm. So what happens when you're now 25, 30, you're trying to get pregnant, you pull it out, that the whole hormonal system's off. Mm-hmm. So I think to answer one of your things about how they just put these young girls on the pill, because it's supposed to help acne or help some other problem is ludicrous. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think just teaching them that it's normal for it to not be regular in the beginning. Because like you said, there's a communication process that's beginning and your body's learning this whole new way of being. And you're in this transition period. So it's okay if it's not regular, or, the minute a young woman gets cramping, it's like, okay, let's take you in. What can we do to change this? But instead, we need to educate them on what's actually happening in their body so they too can make informed choices. And this is like the first stage of becoming a woman, like really making a choice for yourself, your own body, and not doing just what somebody else is telling you what to do.
Right. Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you guys, if you had to choose between the pill that has estrogen and progestin, or just the one that has progestin, what would you do? And is there a benefit to picking one over the other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the estrogen and progesterone, the combination pill, you can get different forms of that one too. They can either be like monophasic, multiphasic, like different dosaging as well. So essentially what that pill does, it's stopping you from ovulating. It's creating your cervical mucus is thicker, so it's harder for the sperm to make its way in. It's also thinning the lining of the endometrium. So there's a few things that are happening that are the same as the mini pill, which is just a progesterone only. It can stop ovulation. There's still debate where they say that it doesn't. I feel like it does because it's something external that's coming into your body and you're taking it every single day. And it's also doing the same thing. It's thickening the cervical mucus, thinning the lining. So for me, in between the two, it depends on the woman in front of me, right? It depends on what her gut health is. It depends on what's going on for her emotionally too. Because I don't think people make a connection between these hormones and what it's doing to our mental health. It can cause depression. It can cause anxiety, all these factors. So I don't know if there's a simple answer to that, but if I were to pick, the lesser evil between the two, I would kind of go for the progesterone only because we're in such an estrogen dominant state all the time.
And one of my thoughts on that, and it's kind of the same thought I have on the Mirena, is that if you are synthetically putting progesterone in year after year after year after year, does the body no longer know how to regulate progesterone on its own? So when you get off of there, what happens to the progesterone levels in your body afterwards? And I don't know, I haven't seen any studies on that on the mini pill or the pill, but that could definitely contribute to people having trouble getting pregnant when they've been on that for a while, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think also people need to understand that chemically the structure of the progesterone that you're getting in the pill, so if it's medroxyprogesterone or whatever form it is, looks very different than your progesterone in your body. So if you think of your body's progesterone looking like a circle, the medroxyprogesterone looks like a rectangle, right? So it's very different. Your body's going to recognize some forms of it, some parts of the chemical structure, but not in the entirety of it. So there's a lot of confusion that plays a role too. And So to answer your question about whether your body starts producing more, I mean, think about anything. Us as humans, if someone's doing the work for me, if I'm hiring someone to clean my house, if that person leaves, it's going to take me a while to get back into a routine, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing with our hormones.
Right.
It's going to take time for the body to be like, oh, wait, I got to kick it up a notch.
Yeah. That's such a good analogy. That's a great analogy.
The cleaning of the house, of course.
Everybody gets that. I don't want to go back to doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so that would be, I would agree with along those lines. Again, I'm not a fan of the pill. I researched all of these when my 16-year-old daughter revealed to me that she was sexually active, and I went from denial of like, oh my God, how did this happen? We've been talking about this for years. How did this happen? And that to, holy crap, I've got to find a resource for her. And luckily I have a friend who's an OB. She's much more medically minded than I would like, but I trusted her, and I needed a place that she could go to. And so we talked about it, and I initially wanted her to do the copper IUD. I'm curious what you guys think about copper IUD, but that was initially my plan, was copper IUD, because I just don't know if a 16-year-old having sex is going to use condoms properly. That would probably would have been my first choice. But yeah, right. Like I said earlier, I just thought, okay, and as you said, Dr. Sonia, what's the intention here? So at 16, the intention is to not get pregnant. Like, absolutely. How do we make sure you don't get pregnant? Condoms just didn't seem like they were going to work right. And so the copper IUD was next. The only side effect the copper IUD that I found or I learned about is if you already have heavy periods, it can make your periods like out of control heavy. And at that time, she was having really heavy periods and was struggling with managing that. So, I mean, these are not easy discussions to have with your 16-year-old daughter, but we tried.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually we landed on the Mirena. And like I mentioned before, after 5 years of it in, she has to make another decision. It has to be changed out. And so at that point, I'm hoping to have them, at 21, 22 years old, you can have a more educated discussion at that point. But one of the things I looked at with the Mirena was I looked at what happens when they get it off of it. Does it make it harder to get pregnant? And my OB at the time said, no, they use it all the time in Europe. It doesn't cause it to be, cause infertility down the road. So I'm curious what you guys think of that. And then I recently looked into some research that's showing there's some links between the Mirena and breast cancer. So I'm back in discussion with my daughter about, okay, what's going to be our option, in the next couple of years for you to change this out.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at one history. So like you were saying with the heavy bleeding and copper IUDs increasing the heavy bleeds if somebody chooses copper, and also deficiencies in that person too, if they're more prone to deficiencies in certain minerals and vitamins. And the thing with the IUDs, with just from the reading that I've done, they're both made with plastic. So one thing that I was kind of thinking about is if this is plastic that's continuously wearing down in the body, where is it going? Because over a lengthy period of time, so the Mirena can stay in for 5, the copper IUD, they sometimes let in for 10. So what's happening to that material? Because as soon as you're putting something foreign in the body's going to create this inflammatory response because it's something that it's not used to having in there. So my thing is like, have they done imaging? Do they know what happened after they've inserted these IUDs into the women? So I just have a lot of questions around that. And I do know a lot of women that are on Mirena and love it. But my question really is, okay, what is the actual long-term side effect? Again, it's a very different progesterone than what your body would be producing. And I think a lot of OBs say that it's very localized, what you're getting. I think it's 50 milligrams per day or of progesterone.
Yeah, they said that was one of the questions I asked. Is I said, can they measure it in the blood? Like when they put it in, can they see a spike? And she said no.
So the
So
research I've done, they've actually said yes.
okay. Well, there you go.
It gets lower and lower as the years go by. So by year 5, it's definitely low, but you can still measure it systemically. If you think about our organs, everything's connected, right? There's blood supply going there. There's lymphatic system. There has to be some form of hormone moving through the rest of the body.
For sure. And the vaginal area, you know, in general, like, is very porous. There's a lot that's soaking up. So
yeah. So I think the difference between those two, like the theory is that the Mirena is doing the same thing that the pill would be doing. It's thickening the mucus, it's creating a thinner lining. So the theory is that it's going to reduce certain cancers because of the thinning of the lining, so you're not getting that buildup. Whereas the copper IUDs, it's actually physically creating an immune inflammatory response. Like all of a sudden, all these cytokines and prostaglandins are coming in, and they're targeting the sperm. So it's creating inflammation. And with saying that too, the copper IUD, you actually have higher risk of depression and anxiety and weight gain. But I don't see any difference with the Medroxy either. So it's like we said in the beginning, I don't know if there really is the best choice, but you make the best choice that you can in that moment for what your intention is. Yeah. What do you think, Dr. Caitlin?
Well, the IUDs are a great option. And let me put it this way, because there's less chance of you missing a pill and taking it at the right time. I'm not a fan of any sort changing our hormones. So the Mirenas and things like that, you know, back when I was 22, 23, I was looking at all sorts of different options and decided, forget it. None of those make sense for me right now. So I didn't go that route. I was actually looking at the copper, but the copper with the plastics and everything, I was like, okay, that's not a great option for me either. But that was just for me. I'm not saying it's not right for somebody else. But yeah, anytime you start taking external hormones, whether it's inserted into you or, you know, you're getting the little insert under your skin or you're taking the pill, you're creating the possibility for long-term repercussions. And it does take time for your hormones, like you said, Dr. Mindy, to rebalance. You know, Dr. Sonia and I were talking, it's at minimum 3 months without having that source. And so it's a break from whatever form of contraceptive they're using so that their body can rebalance. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think also go ahead, Dr. Mindy.
No. Go, you go. I got other thoughts there.
Yeah, I think women kind of need to understand when they are bleeding, even when they have some sort of contraception going on, it's not a true bleed. It's not a true shedding of their lining, which they would be getting if they were just cycling without any sort of pill or IUD. So there's that cyclical, up and down that we have with our hormones when we're not taking anything internally isn't happening. So the signals and the communication in the body have slowed down, whether it's the communication between the ovaries and the adrenals or the adrenals and the pituitary gland, that whole triangle is being affected because of that lack of communication. So it does take a lot longer once that external hormone is gone for our bodies to regulate. And some women do bounce back quickly. I mean, it is woman to woman. Some take several years. And also with these external hormones, we're creating a lot of deficiencies in certain nutrients. So we're depleting our bodies of our B vitamins, zinc, magnesium. Those are the big ones with the pill. And also with the IUD, just because of the progesterone. A copper IUD, you want to look at the zinc and the copper balance in the body. And copper competes with a lot of different things. So the thing with the copper, we can have buildup of that if we're not clearing. So it goes back to what Dr. Mindy said in the beginning, how does your gut work? So it kind of goes back to looking at the full system again.
Making sure your detoxification cycles are open, because anytime you not just have a copper buildup, but you have a hormone buildup, if your body is not getting rid of it, you can be creating long-term problems down the road that you're just not going to know about right away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting because when we made the decision, or, she and I together made the decision, okay, let's go forward with the Marina. Again, my number one goal, and I think it was hers too, was like, let's get through high school without you getting pregnant here. And then the second thought I had was, okay, how do we put you on detoxing now? How do we start working on keeping your gut healthy now, so that even though we know we've made this decision that may not be the best for your health, at least we're backing it up with good nutrition, we're backing it up with regular detoxing. So like, she's been through our whole heavy metal protocol twice now. And, I just keep trying to support everything else that I can. So that's, in my opinion, that's one way you could approach it is, okay, so there is no good option, and pregnancy at this point would be horrendous for me. So therefore, what can I do to counterbalance the damage I know it's going to create in my body? And then that way, at least you're making an educated decision, but you're also not just sitting back and crossing your fingers that something doesn't happen. So curious what you guys think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you keep those detox pathways open and you're actually replenishing the body of some of the nutrients that are getting depleted, like say when you're on the pill, you're taking your B vitamins, you're taking your zinc, making sure that your microbiome, there's variation there, and you're working on the microbiome, because you do have more tendencies towards yeast infections. And I don't think a lot of women relate yeast infection to contraception either. So just thinking about those things, that knowing that these are the things that can show up if I'm going to choose a certain form, but these are the things I need to stay on top of, so that the day I do decide to come off of it, that this is, I've done my work beforehand.
And it's not going to be as much catch up. It's going to be just more repaving at that point.
Absolutely.
I think the big thing too, whatever form of contraceptive you choose, make sure that you're still bleeding. That's the big thing.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, agreed.
That Depo-Provera shot, when someone tells me they're considering that, that's when I cringe. Like, you need to be bleeding. Like, you're getting that shot, I think it's 4 times a year, and it's very clearly labeled, even with that shot, that this is going to increase your chances or decrease your chances of fertility. This is going to increase these cancers. This is going to increase chances of heart attack, stroke, like all these things. Like, just really know what's happening when you're stopping your body from doing what's naturally supposed to do.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we see in health across the board, is people choose the convenience of today at the consequence of their health tomorrow. And I think that's why conversations like this are so important to have, because if you approach every decision like this as an educated, well thought out decision, then at least you know where you may be creating a deficit down the road. So, and I'm curious, what do you guys think of condoms?
Yeah, I would say use them with the other forms of contraception. I mean,
because they're not reliable.
They're not reliable, and latex is the material that's used most often, and a lot of women have sensitivity towards that. It's more in control of your partner rather than you feeling in control of your the contraception that you're using. So there's different aspects to that. Like, I know their efficacy should be 99%, but they can break. So I think there's different things to consider.
There's other condoms out there now. There's like that vegan condom. So there's no latex. So that's a good option for women who are sensitive to latex. There's also the sheepskin one, which can be used with lubricant, whereas latex ones cannot. But you have to be diligent about using it. And you with anything though, nothing is 100% guaranteed other than abstinence. Like, that's it.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what's so frustrating about this particular health subject is that I feel like everything else, food, you could even say, like, we found a way around wine, we found our way around coffee, like, we have found a healthy path for everything. And the only healthy path to contraception is to not have sex. And that's got other problems, but basically that's the only, that when I researched this, it was so frustrating to know that, oh my gosh, there is no all of these have potential to harm.
Yeah, unless you choose something like the Billings method, or you're doing the rhythm method, but then that's a lot of work. So for a student in high school or college, they may not even take the pill every day and forget. So sometimes, like you said, Dr. Mindy, you chose the Mirena so that there is more of that guarantee. But with the Billings method, I mean, you have to be on top of like looking at your cervical mucus, taking your temperature, knowing exactly where you are in your cycle. So there's so many different factors that you have to look at in order to really achieve that 99% efficacy that you can get with the Billings method. And also I think if you are in a relationship, getting your partner involved.
Oh yeah.
So if they're on board with you doing something like that, then that's something that you can do together. You can, and then they will also learn more about your body and your cycle. Like you feel more empowered sharing, you know, what your thoughts are and your thought process. So I think there's definitely other methods, but they're definitely more work, and you have to be willing to do it.
100%. I did the basal body temperature for a year and a half, and it is a huge pain in the butt because you have to take it every morning at the same time, chart it down, and then it shows you really after you've ovulated, you know? So you can chart it and get an idea, but your spike in temperature tells you you ovulated the day before. So, you know, there's still, you still got to be careful with that.
Yeah, and you can't use it alone. You're gonna have to use condoms.
Yeah.
With that kind
Interesting.
of
Interesting. Yeah. So, okay, so we asked this question, I think, before we aired, was if you had to choose today, what would you use? I know.
It was funny.
It's a hard choice, but
I was going through naturopathic school. So initially, like I was on the pill, I would say for about 5 years. And then all of a sudden we're in naturopathic school first year, and all the women in that classroom went off the pill at the exact same time. So it probably wasn't a lot of fun for men in the room because all of our hormones are trying to like fix themselves in those next couple of months.
Oh my God.
Yeah, for me, if I were to look at the different forms, for me, I would be more inclined towards the mini pill. And that's just my own personal choice. For me, having something foreign in the body feels a bit scarier than a pill, even though that's still foreign. It's a different form of hormone, but I feel like I have the tools that I can use to replete my body of the nutrients that it needs, to work on my gut, to work on my detox processes, and then I can take a break. I feel like for me, control is an issue, so I would have more control over it, where I can take it for a few months. I can take a few months off to see how my body does with taking that break, so I can regulate itself again.
Yeah.
So that question is kind of double-edged. Like, if I were to answer that, like where I'm at now, what would I use? So where I'm at now in my early to mid 30s, honestly, condoms is what I would use. Just because the other options right now, I'm just not interested in increasing my hormones and taking on or dealing with the plastics or having to be bothered with any of that stuff. So for me, being in a committed relationship and where I'm at, condoms. Now, if it was me at 16 or I have a 16-year-old daughter, it would either be the copper IUD, because then I'm not messing with her internal hormones, and I can use certain binders and things like that and make sure I'm running the blood test to check copper levels versus zinc, just like you mentioned, Dr. Sonia. And I can use certain things that I can try and reabsorb whatever's being released. Because honestly, I don't necessarily trust a 16-year-old to take the pill as needed. So that would be my 16-year-old me versus my mid 30-year-old me. That's what I would pick.
Yeah, it's a good differentiation, because of where I'm at right now, 2 kids, really, I'm not using anything except for, I would say condom. Yeah.
And the pull-out method isn't the right way to go either, ladies.
Right.
It's called, what you're using, Dr. Sonia, is called lack of sleep and
Fatigue. Yeah, exactly. That's my method right now.
you've got the working woman's young kids sex drive, so that's actually probably the best.
Yeah,
of all.
exactly. Everyone's staring at me
All
right now.
contraception.
How about you, Dr. Mindy? What would you do?
So I would probably do what I did, which is I used condoms all the way through. Like, that was exactly what I used. Yes. And it does take it takes a skill set and it takes forethought, but if you're in committed relationships, if you have a partner that cares and you're thoughtful about how you approach it, it never was a problem. It worked 100% for me all the way through. So when I wanted to have both of my children, bam, it happened both times. Like, we didn't have any problem at all. So I think I would continue with that. But now I have to tell you, as the mom of a teenage daughter, I did not reach for that. Like, that was not a solution because I was too fearful of exactly what you said, Dr. Caitlin, which is, user error and can I trust this? And, I don't know, what her mate's opinion was on it at the time. So, there are too many variables, and I just had decided at the time, the most important thing for these next years is let's not get pregnant. And then we'll move into more course correction. So,
and I think it's also important for moms of boys to have conversations with them.
Yes.
So it's not just for women with daughters, but really have conversations with boys about the different types and having that open conversation so that they know what their partners or girlfriends are going through as well. So it's really important that they're on board.
I think that's so important because, I felt very much alone when I, had to go with her to the OB's office and really had to make this decision. And I felt a little bit like, you know what? I feel like I should call the mom of her boyfriend up and say, here, I just want to talk this through with you. This is what we're thinking. Our kids, we know they're having sex. How do we approach this together like a team? Every time I asked anybody about that, they were like, no, that'll freak her out. Don't do that. But I will tell you, with my son, when that day comes and he has a serious girlfriend, I would reach out to the mom and I would say, if you want to talk about it, I can tell you what I did with my daughter. Like, it is very isolating as the mom of a daughter because you feel like, wow, why are we carrying the burden of this? This is, I lost sleep over it. That I don't think the boyfriend's mom lost sleep over it. And maybe she did. Maybe I didn't know. But that was a really interesting emotional thing that came up for me.
Well, and think about it too, though. There's a lot more that the woman has to deal with too if she gets pregnant, right? It's 9 months of hormone changes and, body changes and then delivery and then your body changes again. And so it's not that, the male, the gentleman, whoever involved isn't responsible. They are equally responsible. They have a 50% commitment to the outcome. But really, women, it's our body and we have to figure out what's right for us. And is it the right time for babies? Is it not? And if it's not, it's up to you to make the decision as to what is the right place or step or things for you to implement. And kind of like you said, Dr. Mindy, I pretty much didn't give my husband an option. I told him I'm not going on any form of birth control, which he was totally supportive of. But that worked for us. It might not work for everybody else.
Well, you guys must have heard about that study they did where they made birth control for men and they were having all these side effects where their mood was off and I think some gained weight and they shut the study down because the men were getting so uncomfortable. And think about all that, women have to deal with the side effects of these hormones, from weight gain to depression and anxiety and infertility and yeast infections, all these factors, and yet there was no study that was stopped or no pill that was stopped. It's just what it is. It's almost like the burden has been put on women to figure it out, whereas men really haven't had that. So I think it's important to get them in the conversation so they have an understanding. And again, that'll empower us too, and our daughters, and the men too, so that they're involved.
Yeah. When my husband and I decided we weren't going to have any more kids, I was like, okay, I have done everything to prevent this. I've done everything to make sure that when we wanted to have kids, we could have kids. So now it's your job to make sure we don't ever have kids again. So it was like a no-brainer, right? Snip, snip. And, I remember he came home and he was in pain. And I'm like, yeah, I get, I have to say I had a little bit, like very little empathy. I'm like, totally get it. Like it really hurts right now, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's actually,
sorry, go ahead.
Talk about that. Women very different procedures. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That,
oh, yeah.
On like tubal ligation.
Yeah, this was my general feeling was I had already had enough that trauma, like giving a child, as beautiful as it is an intense experience. With my first child, I tried to have a home birth. We ended up in the hospital. Luckily she was vaginally delivered, but I tore a lot and I couldn't go to the bathroom for weeks. And my bladder didn't feel the same way. And then when the second child came around, it was we had him at home. It was a much more how I wanted it to be. But I felt a little bit like, I don't want anything else done to my body anymore. So it kind of was an easy decision because I felt like I've carried the burden of this decision throughout our whole marriage. And now you need to step up to the plate. So, and I think it's an easier surgery for men than tubal ligation for women.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what you said is so important. And you were really able to communicate your truth around the topic. And I think women, need to be courageous in saying what it is that they need when it comes to being in that stage in our lives and what we need to choose.
Yeah, our bodies are so interesting. And when you go and you have children, you all of a sudden look at your body, or I had this experience where I looked at my body so differently. Like my body can actually produce milk to feed a child. My body can grow a baby and push the baby out. Like my body became utilitarian a little bit, And it really took, once I was done with that, I was like, okay, that was intense and no more. Like, if we're going to manipulate anything at this point, it's going to be you. But I have to say, once they get a vasectomy, it's much better. You don't have to worry anymore.
All good. You just enjoy.
Yes, exactly. So once you get to this spot, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So what are some takeaways, or what are some questions we can teach women to ask when they go into their doctor's office or their OB? What are some things, some information that they should have on hand?
I always recommend ask for any inserts so that you can read the specifics, no matter what it is. I think it's so important that you understand the pros, the cons, what can happen, what it's doing, and that way you can truly make the right decision for you. I recommend that with any kind of procedure or prescription of any sort. So that's my number one thing, is make sure you ask for the inserts, ask for the information, and then just do what you feel fits your lifestyle, and that's going to accomplish the goals that you're setting out to accomplish.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting to ask when I went through this process with my daughter is what happens down the road. Let's just start with fertility. If we look at all of the different contraceptive options, which one is going to have the most impact on fertility. So, and that's kind of how we ruled out the pill, but I know the Mirena is not exactly, there's still some issues there too. So that would be one. And then, what's the current ramification on my body? So, we know the pill causes you to gain weight. We know that it can lead to more yeast, those kind of things. So looking at what the ramifications, whereas we know condoms can be, yes, there's the synthetic, you can get different materials, but then we know there's user error. So those, I think it's really understanding long-term plus understanding today. What will it do to me today, and what will it do to me long-term?
I also think it's important too that if you react negatively to something or you don't like how you feel on it, go back to your doctor and switch. Like, you're not tied to something for the next 5 years. If you get an IUD that's supposed to last 5 years, but you don't like how you feel on it, go back, get it out, go a different route.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. It's just be informed, get the pamphlets, know exactly what you're putting in your body, and then ask questions. If you are confused about anything, ask. Like, don't be afraid to ask, and get support. I mean, this is what we're here for too, to teach you what it is that your body may be deficient in and what you need and how we can support your pathways. Really ask, get your team together and figure out what the best option is for you, because you are in control. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to fertility, when it comes to contraception, birth, pregnancy, everything, just for the woman to know that this is her body and it's her decision. I think that in itself can create some peace over such a scary decision, and maybe not so scary decision, but some, a decision that we don't know a lot about, because there aren't any long-term studies. We just don't know what this is actually doing. So yeah, be informed.
Yeah. And I think like it's the most precious gift you have, and not being bullied into one form of contraception because that's what your partner wants. Like, what's the most important is that it's right for you. So I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Sonia. It really needs to be, although it's a decision between a couple, it actually ultimately you need to sit with what's right for you, because it's your body and it's going to have the biggest impact on you. So absolutely agree with that. So
yeah, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of putting together a chart with all the different forms of contraception, their disadvantages, advantages, and things like that. So I will put it in the Facebook group once this podcast airs. So again, like Dr. Caitlin says, after every episode, join us on Facebook, like our page, download the podcast and share it, right? And what else? YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
And share it out. This is a good one. I think this is a good conversation for women to hear. So again, this is the whole point of this podcast, is to open up conversations around things that are frustrating women's health. So if you connect with it, share it out, get it out into the world.
And if you have specific questions, ask us on the Facebook closed group.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, guys, this was awesome. I wish we had better answers, but it is what it is. I think it's just a good conversation to start to really make people aware. So cool. Okay, well, have a fabulous day, and we'll see everybody in the Facebook group. Bye.
Bye.